Hey there riders, Moto Journo Kris here, and a quick update on the KTM 390 Adventure, which is receiving a small update in 2022. Small, but targeted, I would say. The first change is that new rims are going to be fitted, and before you get too excited, no, they aren't spoked wheels. It's still cast units, but with a new stiffer design that it's apparently got more resistance to rim damage. That goes from 6 to 5 spokes, although it's double cross spoke kind of design, and they look very thin when it comes to those spokes, but I'm not going to second guess KTM's R&D there. Obviously this is a good thing, as I've seen some criticism that the old rims could struggle in nations with much rougher roads. I couldn't really spot anything to suggest this was a massively widespread issue, of course, but where your roads are destroying a wheel, even if it's just because you couldn't avoid a pothole, it's gonna be frustrating, especially on an adventure motorcycle which has a certain rugged expectation attached. The other major change is the traction control system, which now receives an off-road mode which will allow a certain amount of slip. So you can have a bit more fun before the electronics shut things down, which obviously is important in various situations on the dirt where full traction control may not really be necessary or even what you're after. That means you'll be able to pick between street and off-road mode to suit the conditions, with the off-road ABS mode already allowing the rear ABS to be deactivated in similar conditions. That's cornering ABS as well, which is a pretty high tech for a small capacity machine, which along with the TFT and TC or traction control makes the 390 Adventure one of the best loaded light adventure machines out there. There's also new styling with a black or blue color option, both of which have KTM orange details, although those are more prominent on the blue option. WP Apex suspension is run, and there's 170mm of front travel and 170mm at the rear, which is pretty decent, while 200mm of ground clearance is also good, if perhaps not great depending on who you ask. Both ends offer preload and rebound adjustment as before. I'd say the 390 Adventure is balanced between road and off-road use, with a bit more emphasis on the road, which is reflected with everything we've seen, like the lack of spoked wheels, although these changes should make the bike a bit more resilient and usable when things do get a bit more adventurous. Otherwise there's not a heap of changes. Same steel frame, same Biber brakes, LED lighting, small screen, mid-height exhaust, wide bars with fairly light protectors, more for wind and elements than drops. There's some protection for the header, with the collectors getting even bulkier with Euro 5 of course. The exhaust is a fairly minimal unit though, the seat a two-piece unit, and there's also pillion grab rails, which will be good for tying things down. That front guard is still low clearance, and personally I feel like full dirt bike style front guards are the go, they just look cooler. However, like I said, there's a strong road bias to the 390 ADV. While I certainly didn't have any issues with the rims when I tested the bike last, I will say that a lower intervention mode in the loose stuff would have been nice to play around with, and having two modes offers riders different levels of help, which for new riders is great. I think if we'd seen KTM try and push the off-road angle more, we'd have seen the spoked wheels added and maybe the ergos modified somewhat, as standing on the pegs and reaching down to the bars wasn't the most natural for me at 180cm with a 32-inch inseam, so I'm by no means an enormous rider. And I felt like lowering the pegs would really help there, probably trading off possible lean angle or alternatively a taller set of bars. However, that's going to affect the road side of things of course. As it stands, the KTM 390 Adventure in 2022 builds on the strong position it was launched for, a do-everything bike that's ready for some rougher roads but doesn't really step on the toes of KTM's more serious machinery in that area. The 390 Adventure is also fairly light, so I don't really feel like there's a heap of direct competition. The Versys X300 is cheaper and a little softer overall, I'd say, lacking the cornering ABS, traction control or TFT display. The Himalayan is much lower performance and heavier, with it being a similar story to the KLR 650. The TRK 502X is quite heavy and lacks the fancy features, with the upcoming MV Agusta 5.5 Lucky Explorer, which is the smaller capacity twin, looking like it'll also be fairly heavy, if offering some higher spec suspenders and I think a TFT off the top of my head. Otherwise you've got the carbed DR650, which is still pretty exceptional value despite being very old school, which is probably part of the appeal if I'm honest, while being fairly light but having a 5-speed gearbox. And that reference to the DR650 being fairly light is a reference to some of the other bikes mentioned being 200 or even 220 kilos. But let me know what you think. Do KTM really need to try and make the 390 Adventure a more serious off-road machine, or have they got the balance right now? And is there anything you think that's really missing with this model? Would you be more likely to buy the new 390 Adventure over perhaps the old version, or is there something else that you'd take over one currently? As always, stay safe out there, especially as we get close to Christmas holidays, and thanks for watching.